We would like to welcome to the show now then former Leeds United title-winning manager and promotion-winning manager as well, Howard Wilkinson. It's an absolute honour to have you here. Thank you so much for coming up from Sheffield to see us, Howard. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure.
We're here to talk about legacy. How important to you is legacy, and what do you think your legacy is at Leeds United?
I don't think legacy exists today. I don't think that's because of any weakness in current managers, etc., etc. That is just the name of the game these days. If you look at the 4 leagues in this country, I don't think you'll find too many managers who spend quite a length of time at one club. They tend to change hands fairly quickly. It was different back then, and I think the game was better for it, or it's certainly better for it in terms of you being a member of staff, because it allowed you to work on and affect things which today would be seen to be worthless, because you, in thinking 15 months, 2 years, 3 years ahead, these days would be, you probably these days drive home thinking, I hope my contract gets renewed next season. Not generally, but so, yeah, it gave me time, and after doing it for about 6 weeks, and we were not trying to sell, but thinking about selling, I just decided, driving back one day, that there were advantages to it. And of course, the M1 then was a lot less cars on it than there are now.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about your legacy specifically at Leeds United? Then how do you view it now? How do you think Leeds United remembers you?
I don't, to be honest with you, I wouldn't know how Leeds United or what they think of me now. But what we did at Leeds, for me, would be a perfect model in a perfect world, in the sense that in Leslie Silver and Bill Fotherby, I had 2 terrific people. Well, I worked for Leslie; he was the chairman, but they were terrific in the way I was able to form a relationship with them and get them thinking long term. I mean, Leslie, I think they tried to get me to go there for about 3 or 4 times before I finally gave in and said, and agreed to go and see Leslie, but I agreed to go and see him, basically in order just to say, look, thank you for all your trouble. But so our first meeting was at his office, where his business was, and all the subsequent meetings we had after that, before me joining them, were there. And it was those meetings with Leslie and Bill Fotherby, and talking about, I mean, Leslie in his own way, he was a very, very intelligent, but also a very emotionally intelligent person. And I'm sure he realized what it was he was doing during those meetings, because he never got impatient. And at the beginning, I said, no. And I think the last time when I did go and see him was, well, I'd just like to talk to you about what are your thoughts on developing a club and developing a team and your interest in your development and so on and so forth. So I bought into that and went to see him at the factory after work, after his work, or everybody had left. There was nobody in there except he and me. And then after that, Bill Fotherby. And we had 3 or 4 meetings where we just talked, but not really at any point saying, you know, the reason I'm doing all this is we'd love you to come to Leeds United. It was a sort of ambush, but a pleasant ambush.
Did you know he was trying to do that?
It grew on me. At first, it was a consultation. He was asking me my thoughts on things, and in particular, during our first meeting, he'd picked up my big interest in youth development that I thought needed across the board a lot of attention. I was never happy with the word for young players at that time, which was apprentice. And to me, apprentice, well, an apprentice works in a factory and people tell him what to do. And that's not what you want in terms of developing young players. You want them to give you what it is they're good at and to understand how that works and to think that they were part of they were on a story of a journey of development, which was all aimed at making them better players on the pitch, but also in getting them to think in terms of the bigger picture than just turning up as a player. So he cleverly latched onto that, and you know, maybe the second meeting it was more of, well, explain to me what you were talking about with regard to developing young players. You know?
Yeah.
And I said, well, currently the name's wrong. Mm-hmm. What do you mean? I said, well, they call them apprentices. Apprentice to me smacks of working in a trade where you produce goods, etc.
So was that about treating them with more respect, almost, the scholars?
I think it was treating them with more respect, but it was also more to do with the fact that I wanted the game to understand that to become a very, very good player, or to become as good a player as you can be, it's not just what happens on the pitch that matters. Of course, that matters. But what is just as important is how you think, or what you think about your future. Better understanding of what it is you're being asked to do, not just about tactics on a football pitch.
Do you think, Howard, then, that your legacy at Leeds is as much about Thorp Arch as the trophies?
I wouldn't separate them. I think the two go together. But Thorp Arch, yeah, that was part of my argument with Leslie when he was asking me questions about, well, what would you do? What do you think? He was being as clever as me, really, because I was spewing out to him thinking, oh, he just wants to know, you know, so he can think about youth development at Leeds United. And really he wasn't. He was thinking about convincing me that he would be the right person, as it were, for me to have a career with, in the sense that we weren't, just because he was chairman and I was coach, manager, there were a lot of beliefs that we had to have in common for me to do my best for Leeds United Football Club, and just as important for young players who come into football, not just at Leeds United.
Had you had these discussions at Sheffield Wednesday as well, and why do you think it didn't happen there? What was the pushback on it? Because it sounds like Leslie was kind of on board with this and wanted to do everything that you wanted to do.
Well, I did have these thoughts at Sheffield Wednesday, and I had a background going way back when I was at Brighton as a player. I was down there on my own, and I saw this notice go up on the board in the dressing room saying there was a course starting for what is now called a preliminary award coaching course. And I thought, oh, right, okay, well, I'll go on that because it's something to do, you know? And by the time had been to 2 sessions, I thought, hang on, this is all right. This is more than just how to pass a ball and how to trap a ball. This is more about, and that was down to the person in charge of the course at that time, who was a lecturer at a college, and I quickly developed this interest in, because up until then, they weren't called coaches, they were called trainers. And up until then, I'd not really experienced what I would call an education. Alan Brown was one of the people who got me thinking like that. When he, as a chairman and the manager, and then I went and did the preliminary award, and I just suddenly developed this. Oh, right. So what about that when you finish playing football? Hey, still being in football, but being in football in a way that is interesting and you know, you get better at, the harder you work at it and the more you seek to know about it.
Well, you spoke about emotional intelligence before, and did it appeal to that side of you? Did you consider yourself to have the emotional intelligence to take this on?
Yeah, but when you listen to someone with a proposition, what you want to hear from them is more than just, how can I say, selling cars. You know, the more cars you sell, the more money you get. But this was not about selling a car. This was about improving yourself. So coaching was the right term as opposed to training. So as soon as I got interested in it, I started to develop this idea. Well, they shouldn't be called trainers. A good trainer, in inverted commas, is more of he's not just a trainer. Not like being in the army, attention, left foot forward, and so on. It's how does the game work, and how do you learn and understand how the game works, and how do you become better at working within that situation and making the decisions.
It's funny you should say that, because your nickname was Sergeant Wilko, which is an army term.
Yeah, but
what do you think of that nickname?
Well, it was based on Wilko, which was a program I watched, black and white comedy program about the American, I think it was American Marines, and it was a funny bit. My name was Wilko, so I became Wilko, Sergeant Wilko. I don't think it could have been a reference to how I worked, because I wouldn't have classed myself as a sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
I classed myself more as a teacher, with a responsibility to try to make you better in a rounded sense. That football's not just about being good at trapping a ball and whatever. No. So the best players have a deeper understanding of what it takes to produce a better player and a better football team and a winning football team.
So was that the basis of the 10-year plan, was to take a bunch of young people and to turn them into better humans and great footballers?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest influence on me at that time was Alan Wade, who was then director of coaching, and himself a former footballer, but a college lecturer as well. I think he was at Carnegie. And the moment I went on what was called the preliminary award at Lilleshall in the summer, after the first session and a half, I was hooked, because of the influence of Alan Wade.
How does that turn into a 10-year plan, though? From going, this is great, but how do
Well,
you then...
it's like anything else. You then start to realise that, you know, being in charge of a football team, it's not good enough to just decide on a week-to-week basis what you're going to do next week. Like any other job in that of that nature, where there's got to be a long-term objective. And in terms of sport, particularly team sports, they do require a much deeper understanding of what being part of a team involves, and getting them to understand, if you were working with them, getting them to understand that what you're doing with them is not just beneficial for the team, but in creating in them a better understanding of how to be a successful player, you therefore need to show them what it takes to make a successful team. And that then develops into, if you're there long enough, which is these days not so common, if you're there long enough, it allows you to develop, for want of a better word, a culture.
Mm-hmm.
A culture where they turn up, and even if they don't realise it, they turn up. And what's happening is the person in charge has got a short-term, medium-term and a long-term picture that he's working to, on the basis that the stronger the understanding of the player, the better the team, the greater the success, and so on and so forth. That it's not, well, we lost that last week, everything's wrong, and we won the week before it and everything were right.
Mm-hmm.
It's, okay, we lost, okay, we drew, okay, we won. How do we get better?
It's a role that has come a bit split out recently, because I feel like some of that's more of like a sporting director role in modern terms, because people accept almost that managers come and go. That's almost the 10-year plan. The culture is almost separated from a manager now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but if you're working with the team, you're the only one who can point out or concentrate on at certain times on that aspect of being a better player that is to do with next week, next month, next year, next season. That, yeah, being picked each weekend is great, but part of being picked each weekend and enjoying what it is you do is recognising that what you think and how you think matters, and the more you participate and become engaged, the better it is for you, better it is for the team, and the better the end result after 48, 52, 35 games. Unfortunately, you're right. It is difficult now. But I do think that, even given that you think, the game now could get fired next week, I don't think, if you concentrate on purely the tactics, I don't think you'll have as good a team as when not only is it about tactics, but it's about how you think and what we think and what we do.
Culture.
What
do you think of the news that Daniel Farke was potentially going to be moved out at Leeds? He's the current manager. He won the second tier with 100 points, and then there was speculation that he might lose his job as Leeds move up to the Premier League. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that speculation can and always exist, and might always exist. But I don't think if I was the chairman of a football club, or if I was in charge at some high level in a football club, I don't think you can think about improving if you don't think about improving them and getting them to understand that it's we, not me. Yeah, me matters, but me on my own, I ain't going to win anything. We're going to win things. So, you know, that sense of joint responsibility, you will fail if you can't create that within the group.
Mm-hmm.
And I do see now that it's difficult. You know, if you get people in a job for 3 months and you sack him and then get somebody else in for 3 months, well, fine if that's how they want to do it. But I certainly don't think, I think if you get somebody and you have him and after 3 months he's gone, did you do enough work, research about him and how he works and what he thinks? And actually, do you even understand what it takes to make better players, to make a better team? Do you get that? Do you understand that? It's not just about, oh, we lost this week, let's drop them 3. But players want to know that what you are doing with them is, yes, it's for next week, but it's also for next year for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm hoping that as we develop your education, your picture of what it is that's expected of you increases. And that you hear people sometimes on commentaries talking about a thinking player. Well, you can't. It's like saying, oh, he's a thinking bike rider. I would say, try riding a bike without thinking.
Everyone thinks, don't they? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you spoke about a winning team, and the way you speak, Howard, it feels like you've got a very clear idea of what it takes to form a winning team. What does it take to form a winning team? What did you put in place at Leeds?
Well, you've got to have the players, and the players have got to, you have to convince them. They shouldn't have to convince you. You have to convince them that what you are trying to do is not just for the short term, it's for the long term. You have to be able to sit down and talk to them about the long term, I think. And, you know, you can think about, I can think about, without naming names, individual players who have responded better to that outlook. That's not to say the others haven't. That's maybe because that person actually could understand why some of the things you were doing were being done and recognise that they just weren't for the next game, but they were for the long term. So when you talk about something like developing a team spirit, well, how do you get a team spirit if you haven't got a team? If the spirit is not for everybody, rather than how do you develop a culture if all you say is make sure you turn up on time, don't be late again, and then when you finish the training, start thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow with them? No. That's important, but you can't. Coaching is good coaching is teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And to be a good coach, you've got to think past the next day, the next week, the next month, despite the insecurity.
When you're first getting started in coaching, who are the people you're looking up to then at that point in the game?
As I said, I did a preliminary course when I was down in Brighton, which that's when I started to find. And then when I was in Brighton, the reserve team coach was a gentleman called Steve Burtonshaw, who went on to manage, and but he was coach assistant then, and I recognised in his in the training sessions a difference. A similar difference to what I noticed when Alan Brown came to Sheffield Wednesday. Alan Brown, he dealt with you, he recognised that he was not just interested in, the tactics, but he was also interested in getting you on board in terms of his thinking, and therefore making yourself better because of a better understanding. Because, in other words, what would he reads the game well mean if you didn't understand what reading the game meant?
How closely do you think you and Gordon Strachan shared feelings about that? How important was Gordon Strachan to you?
Well, very, very important, because my experience of Gordon before then, and watching him play, etc., and then having met him and talked to him about Leeds and so on, I recognised that he was someone who got that and who had developed that. And that's important. Do you necessarily have to be like that? No. I've known players who've been very, very good players who turned up and didn't really like training and weren't that much bothered about playing.
David Batty. You don't have to say yes.
But that's that there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the jigsaw. That recognising that exists and that you will live and die by results, and therefore you have to take all that into consideration, and you have to be prepared for disappointment. And don't judge people who don't actually think as deeply as you do about what it is they do. That would be wrong. You can't. Imagine sitting down as a coach, even more so I would think these days, saying, look, all I want you to do is come here and win football matches. Well, we're going to do that. Well, we're going to train. All right. Train, okay. Training starts at 10, it ends at 11:30. Well, a good coach, yeah, it starts at 10 and ends at 11:30, but that's just part of the learning process that you as the leader are trying to get them to understand.
Do you think Gordon Strachan helped you to take that idea onto the pitch of culture and buy-in?
Yeah, he bought in. He was going to go to Sheffield Wednesday, and then I managed to get hold of him after he'd, I think, seen them 2 or 3 times and speak to him. And I recognised in him the qualities that I thought that were important. And if you look back at your career, he will be one of those people in that journey that was an asset in terms of taking on board what it is you were thinking, understanding that, and recognising that if we can all join in with this, we'll get better results than if we just concentrated on turning up for training, doing the tactics, and then going on. And that's the end of it.
How hard was it to achieve what those players did, promotion and title? How hard was that as a task?
I think if you want to be a good coach, if you're going to be a successful coach, I don't think the term hard work means anything at all. It's hard work at what that matters. And if you want to be a good coach, it's getting a bigger and better understanding of what it takes to make a successful player and a successful team. And part of that, in fact, a large part of that will be about personal development and will be about getting them to better understand what it is we're doing, how we are doing it, and how that will come to make us a better group, and how much we rely on each other and how important it is to be able to rely on each other and to have people, everybody in the team recognising that it's we, not me.
How did you get the players to deliver that title? And I'm thinking specifically about when you lost at Manchester City. It was 4-0 on the run-in 1992. And it looked like it had all gone south. The conversation famously, we believe, is you told them to trust your swing. Golf terminology. Can you just explain a little bit about that, about what you said to those players that meant they went on to win the title off the back of such a heavy defeat?
It's a very simple lesson, but that for me at the time was the best way I could, in my head, think about what we were doing and why we were doing and what the benefits are. So, the best golfers in the world will sometimes not win the tournament that they are favourite to win. And what's the basis for their ability to be the best players in the world, individuals? Well, it's all about swing. That's fundamental to what it is they do. And it was just me trying to give people an example of what it is we were trying to do and why it was important that we individually understood, but we also collectively understood what it is that will make us more successful and make us win more games than we should. So a very simple example for me at that time would have been set pieces. So without getting too technical, I very early on started to understand defending at set pieces and started to think about, well, actually, what's most important, for instance, if you've got a set piece against you in the attacking third? What's most important? What are the opponents trying to do? They're all working on manoeuvres to drag you to different positions in order that, having left that position, they can put the ball in that space and somebody else will come into there and score the goal. And I thought, well, I know I've tried to understand a bit about this, and surely if there's a set piece against you in the attacking third, if there's a set piece against you in your defending third, what matters is that you have people in the spaces that critically matter. And it's quite easy to define those spaces. Now, if you're man-to-man marking, some of the man-to-man marking strategies will be, well, he's their best header, so you run him out of the far post where we're going to put the ball so that we can run into that space and not have to deal with their best header, defender, and so on.
So is that trust your swing? Is that about remember the things that got you here? These things we've worked on.
The principles.
Yeah,
the principles. Getting them to better understand the principles. And you can't expect everybody to take that on board. You can expect people to take it on board, some to a certain extent and some to a lesser extent. All in all, as a big picture, I think it's a far better way to defend, for instance, on a set piece in the defending third, to make sure you've got people in those areas where goals are scored. I mean, put it in a very daft sense, it's like being in the war, First World War, digging trenches, but you've dug them in the wrong place. You've got soldiers in the wrong place, and they're walking through the space that you've left by being in that wrong space.
What did it mean to you to win the title in 1992?
It's just very satisfying to share the benefits of a common achievement, a together achievement, where everybody contributed different qualities, but in the end recognise that if we all do what it is we should do, we have a better chance of, so our best example of that could be in simple terms. We'd work at Leeds on if teams were man-to-man marking when defending in positions in the attacking with free kicks, corners, etc., throw-ins in the attacking third. Have a look at them. Have a look at what they're good at. Have a look at their strengths. And can we ensure that people who are very good for them in certain areas won't be very good for them if they're chasing somebody who's running out of that area to allow someone else to go into it and deal with the delivery.
Do you feel like you properly enjoyed the title win? Because it feels that you had a 10-year plan and that came 4 years into it. Did you get the chance to stop in 1992 and enjoy that achievement?
Yeah, enormously. Enormously at the end of the season. Enormously. But like being a good chef, when you was cooking a good dinner once, is it? You're going to do it again.
It's that from hearing you talk about the set pieces and things, I think it maybe shows the difference of winning something as a manager and winning it as a fan, because you're obviously very fondly remembering like the stuff that went into it almost. Whereas as fans, I guess we just get to enjoy the results.
It's the feeling.
It's the satisfaction of the work you've done and seeing how that has paid off.
That's reality. Mm-hmm. My dad worked down the pit all his life. Took me to Sheffield Wednesday when I was 5. He went to Sheffield Wednesday, not because he was an absolute football fanatic, but he liked football. And it's only right that he should, as it were, get away from the coal mine and stand out in the open air on the Spine Cop at Hillsborough and watch a football match. What's wrong with that? In a daft sense, you could say, well, that made him a better miner because, he recognised, and in particular with it regard to him, he was part of what was called safety mines squads who were called to, if there was a disaster somewhere, they got them in because they were trained in dealing with the gases and the this and the that and the other. But he left school when he was 14. So his intelligence was always there, but it wasn't recognised when he was... It's only when he went down the pit and then down the pit, they realise, well, hang on a minute, this stuff called gas, that's a problem and can be a problem.
You're talking there, Howard, about the pleasure that it brings to fans watching it on the terraces. Do you understand, you think, the amount of joy you've given to Leeds fans? Do you have a full grasp of that?
Well, yeah, of course you do.
Because you were there at the parade, obviously, in 1992.
Yeah, of course you do. Yeah, and that's, if you're an actor, what is it? What part of acting is it that you appreciate such that you think, well, I couldn't act properly if I didn't, at the end of the show, have to do off stage, back on the stage, off the stage, back on the stage. That, to me, says we appreciated what you've just done.
Was that recognition, was that important to you to be recognised by the fans?
It wasn't of primary importance, no. Mm-hmm. No. Fans are entitled to their point of view. And sometimes their point of view can be negative, but can be warranted. Sometimes it can be negative and it's not warranted, but you have to learn to accept both of those, because they don't come to a football match, you start thinking like Pythagoras or somebody. They're not philosophies. They're there to go on, entertain me. And obviously part of the entertainment is supporting a successful team. So you have to understand all that. That don't expect them to be fair. Great if they are, but don't expect it.
So what was that like in 1992, getting that recognition? Is that something that stays with you? Was that your Oscar, your encore moment?
Well, I suppose on paper, yeah. But I can think back to when I was at Boston United as player coach, being drawn against Derby County in the FA Cup and getting a draw against them. We got walloped in the return in Boston, 6-1 I think it was, but we got a draw there. So, yeah, of course, I remember that Derby County game. There's some games I can't remember when I was at Boston United. But I remember that. But that's the sunshine. That's a sunny day in what can sometimes be a bad year or month.
I mean, that makes me think back to Wembley in 1996 and the League Cup final, which was probably the best or the worst example of what you're talking about there. You faced a very difficult walk back to the Leeds United dressing room, which was at that side of Wembley. How did it feel to be you at that moment? Were you able to rationalise that, be philosophical about it, or was that truly painful?
Well, it's painful, but that's part of it. If you can't deal with that, then you're in the wrong job. Don't expect them. Don't expect Socrates to be on the terrace. There might be some, but I've had in my life, I've had some very, very intelligent friends. Were they intelligent fans? No. I've had some discussions with doctors of philosophy and so on and so forth, but put them on a spying cop at a football match, and they're lunatics.
So different horses for different courses, perhaps.
Yeah. And people are entitled to be what it is they want to be at certain times. So if I go to see a show, I go to be entertained. And if what they're doing don't entertain me, I ain't getting what I'm supposed to get.
You didn't get the chance to finish your 10-year plan because it came to an end in 1996. Is that perhaps your biggest regret about the way that you left Leeds, is that it was unfinished business?
Well, of course it's a big regret. Of course it's a big regret. But c'est la vie. Imagine managing now. 3 months is a good stint, let alone 3 years. So times change and you've got to recognise the change and deal with it.
Do you recognise that Leeds fans are really, really desperate to honour you and say thank you to you for what you did for the club? Because I know, speaking personally, you brought me a lifetime memory in 1990 and 1992, and loads of stuff around it as well. It was fantastic. Do you understand that Leeds fans would like to mark that and recognise you?
I do understand that. Yeah, of course I understand that. But I don't expect them to understand what it is the coach, the manager and whatever has to do. Because going to the football match for most of them is a day off. No matter how hard it's been at work, to go to the football match and win it can be a terrific relief.
But don't you think that Leeds fans recognise your goals with the 10-year plan, which was about Thorp Arch, and we still see today, like think about Archie Gray, Harry Gray coming through. You must be so proud to see those, especially because they've got the Gray name, coming through the academy, and the academy still being so important to Leeds United. Do you understand that Leeds fans recognise that?
I don't think... Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. But I don't expect them all to understand it. In fact, I don't expect anyone to understand it. Hopefully they do. But they turn up. It's their holiday, not yours. You know, it's like going to the theatre. And there's a comedian on. If he don't make you laugh, you feel cheated.
But don't you think that you spoke about culture, and the culture that you spoke about, Howard? I think that goes hand in hand with the identity that the fans have, because the identity of the club is so important to the fans. So important. And I think the culture within the club, I think, is really important there. Yeah. The two go together. So do you understand that you've created a thing that people are really attached to? This forms part of the modern day Leeds United identity. I think it's more than just being entertained. It's about how you feel, your relationship.
Yeah, I do understand the emotional, the part that being a football fan, the part that's played in terms of emotion. It's one of the benefits to me as a fan. If I'm allowed to go and stand on the cop, say what I want, do what I want, and at the same time, at the end of the game, be cheering as loud as I can because we've just won the semi-final, or that's another 3 points, etc. Part of what it is you do is affect them, and you will hopefully affect them for the better in terms of giving them a ray of sunshine if a ray of sunshine is needed in their life.
Well, you gave us a lot. You gave us a lot more than perhaps you are acknowledging there. It wasn't just a day out. It was memories for a lifetime. So final question is this then. How could we, in your eyes, mark your legacy at Leeds? What would be fitting to you?
Get Adriano Piazzarola back to the Flying Pizza, owning a Flying Pizza, and have dinner for myself and my 8 guests. And it's all on Adriano.
I think he'd probably do it for you.
Who's now retired.
Yeah. Have you still got
his feet up?
Have you still got the cap, by the way? The Flying Pizza cap? Have you got one of those around in the house somewhere?
I think so. I mean, you'd have to ask my wife. She deals with the memorabilia.
So you think you're keen to downplay how we could mark your legacy at Leeds United?
I'm not keen to downplay it. No, I'm not. I'm not keen to downplay it. I'm just slightly embarrassed, but very appreciative of the fact that, and also I'm not forgetting that how lucky have I been when you look at some of the things that happened to some of the people I know who've been involved and are involved in football compared with what I had at Leeds. So I had a relatively happy journey through the seasons at Leeds, and look back on it with pleasure. There were downsides, of course, there always are. But in the main, I think ultimately the rewards, I'm driving up from Sheffield, I'm driving back down to Sheffield. When I first accepted the Leeds offer, because of the persuasiveness of Leslie Silver and Bill Fotherby, who between them were 2 fantastic blokes to work with and for. And I think, well, compare that, you know, on a bleak day, driving back from Leeds, that, you know, in reality, if my wife was in the car with me and knew what I was thinking, she said, well, it could be worse. You could be back down the pit tomorrow.
Well, thank you so much for coming to speak to us. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My pleasure.